Okay, so today well, let me first explain what I'm doing. So, this game is called Total War Warhammer. Now, Total Warhammer 2 has been out for a while. I haven't gotten it, I'll be getting it soon, but I've been trying to kind of get into multiplayer battles in this game, because Total Warhammer 1 and 2 kind of get combined, if you didn't know. And so, I played this guy. I've been trying to work on my Empire, and he uh, basically got destroyed, but I kind of want to analyze these battles, mostly just for myself, so I can kind of learn from them. But yeah, let's get into this first one. So this first one, if you look at his army compared to mine is much smaller, but it's not super specialized. I mean, he's got a lot of low quality units that my cavalry are just going to be able to completely destroy. So, we get into the battle right here. Let me just pause so I can look at the lineup. If you look at my deployment, I brought two great cannons. You'll see me bring great cannons a lot because they can just shred all other kinds of artillery just to bits. They're just great artillery all in all, and I feel like when you play the Empire, you kind of gotta have that artillery. I have this Light Wizard. I didn't really use that very much, but what the Light Wizard can do is it has this ability. I can select it. Let me select it. It has this ability that gives this really good buff to these frontline units. And they're great swords, and if he'd actually brought good dwarven units, like not just dwarf warriors and dwarf warriors with great weapons, he probably would have been able to beat me in the melee, even with the buffs and the Imperial Captain. And so on this flank, I had 2 units of Empire Knights and some Demogryphs just to provide some shock, because cavalry is very important, and I have Karl Franz on Demogryph, and just starting the game off, I noticed immediately that he has artillery too. I kind of want to mitigate that as fast as possible. So you'll see, I send the cannons to just attack his front line. Nothing much. And he's already firing, he's turning to fire, so I start sending my cavalry out. He's going to send his gyrocopter out to counter, so I send, in a second, Karl Franz out to attack his flying units. They do not have very much HP. I'll be able to break them really quick. And see, I'm not even gonna worry about it. I lose 2 models, just a little bit. It doesn't really matter. He's busy microing the gyrocopter, so he's not really paying that much attention to. He could have countered with some of these. None of these are anti-large, so it's not like he would be able to do that much damage. So as you can see, I pretty much immediately in that first charge just completely break both of his cannons, so that artillery's out for the rest of the game. So I have pretty much unrestricted artillery attacks, so I just start bombarding. You see a lot of these units have already taken, let's see, they've taken almost, they've taken over 100 casualties already, so I'm just charging these down, and I just start attacking these Quarrelers. He got them with great weapons, which meant they were a little harder to take out than I expected. I didn't micro them as well as I probably should have. I probably should have been cycle charging a little more, and you'll see me do that in the latter two battles. But I was more paying attention to this huge front line that was just charging at me. This huge amount of dwarf warriors against just Empire Captain and 3 units of great swords. But you'll see what happens with that. So these guys are kind of getting bogged down in the melee because I really should be basically taking them out of combat, charging them in again and again and again until they break. And then Karl, see, is not even doing anything even after he took out the gyrocopter, so I'm going to send him in a minute to attack the archers, but I'm really preoccupied with this. He's moving up pretty quickly, but as you can see, he's already taken 200 losses, right? And I start cycle charging at this point. He's taken over 300, almost 300 losses, and I've lost 20 men. So clearly the trades are going over. I know I have like the third of the size of an army, but I'm still doing a lot more damage than he is, so I just start cycle charging to try to break them as quickly as possible, because these Quarlers, I don't want them to be doing damage to me. So I just keep charging them in. Thorgrim over here, his general isn't really doing much. I think he moved up to attack here, but I am just bombarding them with these 2 units of great cannon. And you'll see how many kills they get by the end of the game. It's just a huge number of kills. They just take out these dwarf warriors en masse, and it also kind of hurts their morale as well, which you'll see, because they break pretty quickly. So he sets up his first line. I'm feeling pretty confident at this point, because I'm breaking these guys. I got Carl on these guys, and I know that once I break them, I can charge in and attack the flanks. At this point, I push up, because I kind of want to engage his front line. Because I know he's kind of a newish player, and I think he'll charge into reinforce, which he does. And even if he tries to go around, I can just charge into them backs with the cavalry. Because at this point, I've taken, what, 50 casualties, and he's lost 500 men, just routing in mass. So I charge these guys straight into here. I got Carl. I think I send Carl friends against Thorgrim. At this point, I cast that one spell that I was talking about. It's a great buff. I could just hold on to that for a second. So yeah, these guys get bogged down again a little too much. I kind of charge them out against the dwarf warriors, and these casualties are just piling up. I just still got Carl friends, just making sure that these archers don't come back. And if you look at my front line, even right here, which these great swords are fighting, what, 5 units of dwarves? And as you can see, they're still just shredding them apart. This Byronus Time War plus 34 melee attack and plus 24% speed. That plus 34 melee attack just shreds through the enemy. And that's the main reason you want to use the Light Wizard. Just for that one ability, even though it's really expensive, it's kind of broken. But I don't really use it in the later ones, because I see that this guy, it's not going to be really that hard to defeat his mainline infantry units. So I just decide to not really spend that much on that. These guys back here, he's not really microing them. I'm not sure what he's microing right now, but it doesn't look like he's microing pretty much anything. Because, I mean, there's not much he can do now. I've taken a good amount of losses because it's the frontline fighter, but he's lost just most of his army, and they're all about to rout. I think one of my Empire Knights route there just because they've taken a lot of losses fighting the back lines. So at this point, I just go into Thorgrim. I got the great swords on him. Light Wizard only didn't really do much this game. I probably at this point should just throw him into melee because he wasn't really doing anything. But once Thorgrim goes down, because he takes a lot of damage from Franz, because Franz is just a duelist in general, especially with Deathclaw. But yeah, it was an easy death. As you can see, huge amounts of kills on this side. A total of 263 kills with the cannons, 119 for the Demogryphs, 98 for these Empire Knights, and 57 for this one. And then our frontline units just shredded through his men. They couldn't do any damage at all. I mean, the Quarrelers did some damage because they were engaged in melee for a long time, but they really didn't do much. So I took 162 casualties, he took 913. And as you can see, my 3 heroes were pretty much at full health the entire time. Alright, for the second one, he chose Bretonnia. And this one was a little closer, because I'll show you why in a second, why it was closer. So he brought 2 units of Pegasus Knights. Now, I only have 1 flying unit in my army, and that's Karl Franz. And I realized pretty early on that I couldn't really beat those 2 with any other unit besides Karl Franz. And you'll see kind of what happens with that. He also brought those 2 units of Trebuchet. I feel like he was a little more into it this time. If you look at my army composition, I spent actually a pretty large sum of money on these Demogryph Knights with halberds, because I thought instead of bringing Pegasus Knights, he'd bring some of the stronger Grail Knights, which are ground forces. The Pegasus Knights aren't quite as strong, but they're still pretty good forces, because these guys are anti-large, while the Grail Knights are anti-infantry. I I think if I was him, I'd bring that. So I spent a little more on spears. I didn't bring the light wizard, which actually probably would have been a good choice in retrospect, because I could use that to stack onto these Pegasus and take them out a lot quicker than, as you can see, what would happen in here. So I brought the same 3 great swords and the Empire Captain on the ground, but this time I brought 3 great cannon, because it just did so much damage in the last battle. So let's get this started. So I immediately, I think in this one, just target his trebuchet with it. And I think I send out my cavalry to attack it pretty early on, because I noticed that, again, I want to have that artillery advantage so I can just start bombarding his units without having that threat of my cannons getting taken out by his artillery, which isn't as good as mine. Mine has 450 weapon strength. His only has 228. 228. Actually, I think his has more. Mine has better fire. I'm not sure. I just think in general they're better, and especially because they're anti-large, they can take out these Pegasi pretty quickly, which you will see in a minute when I decide to start pushing. I think at this point I was trying to see if I could beat him in a range duel, but my troops were way too close to my trebuchet for it to be effective. I mean, got a really big hit onto them just now, but I can't really afford trading 1 for 1, as I kind of realized I was doing, simply because if you look, I still have half the men that he does. So I kind of start spreading out. I'm taking some pretty big hits directly on my cannon, and I think it's at this point that I decide that something definitely has to be done. And I send out my cavalry, and then I send out Franz to try to counter the Pegasi, which they have about the same HP each that Franz does. So, and in this battle, I kind of keep my main battle line back a little more than I probably should have. I probably should have been pushing them up already, because he doesn't. He only has 2 ranged units, so it's not like they could have done that much damage to my forces on 3. But he does bring a lot of mediocre infantry to the battle, which makes it a lot easier. But I think at this point I send Franz directly in to just try to disrupt the fire, because I've already taken some pretty big hits onto this great cannon. Yeah, these Pegasi Knights are Fran's bane, and you'll see what kind of happens. They have pretty good armor, but Franz is armor piercing, which is really good. So I changed Karl Franz to attack the Pegasi. But first I just totally break this trebuchet, so I put that one out of action. He brings in these polearms, these men-at-arms, to counter my cavalry, so I kind of pull them back because I don't really want to deal with that. Franz wades in for a second, but then the Pegasi lands, so I kind of pull Franz back in order to deal with that. So I mean, the good thing is this is why I brought the Demogryph Knights, because the Demogryph Knights could totally destroy the Pegasus Knights if they didn't stay in the air, so I send Franz pretty much after them. And I think it's at this point that I realize that Franz can't beat these alone. And I start attacking, and you'll see this in a minute, I start attacking the Pegasus Knights with all 3 cannon units. So this is, neither of us kind of doing anything, we're trying to gauge what's going to happen here. From what I can see, Karl Franz is going to lose this. The good thing is Karl Franz causes fear, which means that if their morale gets down to a certain level, they'll rout, which you'll see during the battle. But he starts moving his polearms back, and I just start charging his front line and moving up my main battle line, just to kind of escalate the battle, so it's not just this flank we're focused on. So I begin attacking. They're taking those fire arrows from his peasants, but I'm not taking too much damage. I lose like a couple models there. But this first charge, these men-at-arms just have horrible leadership, horrible morale, so we'll just break really quickly. Again, I probably should have already been cycle charging at this point. peasant bowmen already have really bad morale just because of the fact that my artillery has been shooting down upon them. If you look over at my Pegasus Knights, the Pegasus Knights one, they're shaken. This one starts wavering, but my Carl Franz still has a very small amount of health left. And I continue to pursue them. I think I wasn't really paying attention over here, so at that point I probably should have kept pursuing them. But they kind of just came back really quickly from routing, which was kind of unfortunate. And I pulled these troops back and started cycle charging them until my main battle line came up, because they were taking a minute because they're heavily armored. And so I continued the attack. At this point, enemy had lost almost 400 men. I'd lost 23, so pretty decent trading. The balance power was in my favor, but at this point I probably again should have cycle charged these, because these pole arms are just going to destroy my cavalry. Just destroy them, because they have anti-large, charge defense against large, so really shouldn't be attacking those with cav. But I just start pushing up with my main infantry forces. And Franz is just not having a good time against his Pegasus Knights. He's about to get charged by these ones too. But these, the Pegasus Knights would break a lot, but they'd also come back a lot, which was kind of unfortunate, because this one would break, and then I'd engage with this one. And it was just not very fun in general. So I think this is the point where Franz starts routing. I used stand your ground just so he just wouldn't take as much damage. But it just unfortunately wasn't enough, because he just taken so much damage and these guys just kept coming back. At this point I ordered him to pursue, but he routed just because he'd taken enough damage. Didn't really matter. Now my great swords moved into position. I was using my Empire Knights to kind of hunt down these forces that had come back from routing the noticed. And so these cav were kind of waiting for the rest of his forces to engage, so I just smashed into his flank. So he was trying to chase down Franz, so I rotated these cannons to just shoot volleys off into the Pegasus Knights. And it just took a couple direct hits and just totally just wrecked this unit. Shot like 7 of them out of the sky. Just perfect shots. And that's why I really like these great cannons, because they can just snipe cavalry, and they can also snipe if you're playing against a faction that has monster units. They can just snipe those too, because they do such a huge amount of damage. And they also have this crazy long range. If you hover over them, they can shoot all the way from there to here, so it's beautiful. And I think at this point I still have the spears covering it, just in case these Pegasus Knights come back, which they are. And I've kind of pulled Franz over this way so that my great cannons can have a better shot on them, but I'm just firing volley after volley into his men-at-arms. You see, he's lost about half his army, and I've lost about 80 men. So he's kind of firing into the back of his own men here. My great swords are destroying him for the most part. My captain is still on really good health, but I still kind of need him because he still has this paladin and Albrecht de Bordeaux still left. And so I order this charge into the side of his men-at-arms and into the back of whatever infantry is still. He's got what remains of his field trebuchets, these still there. These Pegasus Knights just keep getting routed just simply by these cannons, just sniping them out of the sky. Because as you can see, there's only 1 left in this unit, 3 left in this unit. Franz probably able to take them alone, but I think it's more satisfying to watch these crazy Imperial engineers just snipe them. And I think, yep, that's the last one. Just snipes them out of the sky. So at this point, I start moving up my spears because I realized they're not really a threat anymore. And that cavalry charge routs the last of his men in this engagement. So I pulled the cavalry out to the right and moved these infantrymen into his main forces. And I kind of, with this force, they're pretty damaged. And at this point, we've almost got even numbers of men. So I kind of just use them to chase down whatever remnants he has around here, whatever forces route, make sure that when they come back, my cavalry are already on him. And at this point, these two, the Paladin and Alberic, are doing pretty good damage to my captain. He's trying to 1v2 them at this point, which is going to be very difficult for him because he's got... I know he's got more health, but he's still... it's still a 2v1 against two heroes, and with Franz kind of out of action, because with only 200 damage, I don't think that him dying would be very good. I might have wanted to just move him up to here, and then just use one of his abilities to boost them in general. This is where the Light Wizard would be absolutely fantastic, because you could pull him up to here, cast that that one spell, and just all of these troops out here get plus 36 mana attack, just devastating. So I bring these men in here to kind of chase down these forces that are wavering. At this point, I do believe it's only Albrecht and the Paladin still left. So I charge in with some of my Empire Knights, because they're anti-infantry, and both these men, they're both infantrymen, just so I can do as much damage as possible to them. But I still want to keep these guys routing over here, so I continue the attack. I didn't even notice until later in the battle that my spears had actually attacked his polearms. As you can see, the spearmen are just a little bit better than the polearms in general. They'd already taken damage in the fighting, and that shield also means that their melee defense is just that much better. So that really helped with that. And I think that the polearm's a little more expensive, so the spearmen, they just have better leadership in general. If you look at most of the Bretonnians don't have as good leadership as other factions. And at this point, the end of the battle, if you want to look at the statistics, he loses 1,198 as 200, so he loses almost 1,000 more men than I do in this battle. And if you look at what units actually contribute, as you can see again, the Great Cannons inflicted, let me do the math here. If you look at the casualties of just the cavalry and the cannons, which are my specialist units, the great swords are mostly, and the spears are just to hold the front line. These two are to take out specialists. If you take that 135 plus 168, let's just take the cannons plus 128, that's 431. Now if you take 1,198 divided by 431, or sorry, 431 divided by 1,198, that's 35% of the army just killed by these great cannons. And now if you take the casualty statistics with the cam, that's 172 plus 167 plus 117 plus 431. That's 887. That's 887 divided by 1,198. That's 75, almost 75% of the army was just killed by these knights and these cannons. Just devastated most of these forces before they could even really get into combat with my main line, which are these great swords, which also absolutely shredded these very bad troops. I mean, they couldn't, these men-at-arms and these polearms could basically do nothing. Their morale was already shattered from the just bombardment that occurred. They really were broken because the great swords just in general have better stats. He needed more kind of armor-piercing units, because the great swords have really high armor, and so does the captain. So that's why I think that if you're going to play as Bretonnia, you need to use a lot of that cavalry more. So one last battle. This is the last battle I did against this guy, and I finally used cycle charging in this battle. So in this battle, I changed my lineup a little bit. The main thing I did is because I noticed how he brought in the Pegasus Knights and how effective those were against my against Karl Franz. They basically took him out of the fighting. I decided to put my Imperial Captain on top of a Pegasus so I could use those two to counter in case he brought them, which he did. I also brought the same 3 cannons, same front line, same basic setup, but I had to only use 1 spearman unit, and I didn't think that'd be too damaging. And he brought his 2 trebuchet. He brought more greatsword infantry. It's anti-infantry armor piercing, and I realized that my greatswords just not have a good time against him, just because of their armor and armor piercing. I decided I was gonna the plan was to bring this cavalry up, and just try to cycle charge, try to take out as many of these foot squires as possible. In this encounter, he was using his trebuchets a lot better than he did before. I think he took out a good number of some of my greatswords. But I realized that he had a lot less anti-cavalry forces, and he wasn't the best microer. So I knew that I could definitely just charge and use greatswords here a little later on, and kind of take out these men-at-arms once these trebuchets were taken out. Because I really didn't want to have to deal with these trebuchets. And I knew if I moved him with my cav, it would not be good because the King Loan's there and all his pegs. I didn't want it to turn into a brawl. I kind of wanted, again, to have that artillery advantage really early on. I was bombarding them with my own cannons, which is a really good strat, especially when they got a really weird formation like this. Because even if they miss, they're still going to hit some of the units in front or behind, which is going to do a good amount of damage. Yeah, and this one I was taking more casualties than I wanted to with my greatswords, so I basically tried to move them behind this rock and these trees right here. This one was taking the biggest beating. These two didn't really get touched. He moved these Pegasus up there, so I kind of kept my two flying units over the side. The Empire Captain isn't quite as good as Karl Franz in the air, but he's still decent, and I knew he'd be enough to kind of keep one of the units occupied. So I moved these cavalry up to the side. He's kind of moving his foot squires to protect the flank, which is probably the mistake that he made, because he probably should have repositioned these to the right flank and kind of moved these up to here. But again, I would have just attacked from the front or the right as I had before, which is why you kind of need your own cavalry as Bretonnia in order to defend against that. Let's see. Yeah, he kind of moved. He tried to make a line here, and I don't know exactly why he did this. The trebuchets are taking a little bit of damage here, and I knew that if I got my cav in close enough, they might rout because they have really poor leadership, as all Bretonians do. So once my troops got in position, because these again they were taking a beating, 89. They lost 40 men already. I lost 35, that's still pretty bad. So I just decided to charge straight in with my cavalry. Because I knew I need to get close into at least one of these trebuchets in order to mitigate the damage that they do. So again, Empire Knights and those demigriffs with halberds. Regular demigriffs would probably have been fine too, because it's probably even better because they're anti-infantry, because these are anti-large, just in case he brings some really good cav, I can counter them. So I charge in, devastating charge. As you can see, these guys immediately start wavering. His casualties go up, and I just bring them out immediately, before they take very many casualties at all. These took 3, they took 2, they took 0. Well, his units took still a pretty good amount of damage. So then I charged them in just again. While their formations were not really tight, this charge didn't really do as well, but these two were very good. He started moving these two units to kind of counter. I got worried that he'd be moving his halberds over. But I think the reason he didn't move the halberds over is because he knew I could fly in with these two at a time. I think at this point, this is the point where I start kind of moving these forces up. I'm really microing over here these charges. As you can see, they've taken almost half of their damage. He does move these polearms over here, and I think that's when I decide that I need to move my greatswords up in order to kind of counter this attack. So I keep pulling them back, and I keep just cycle charging, just destroying the morale. Oh yeah, I forgot that, I think these demigriffs, I'm not sure if they cause fear or not. I don't know if Karl Franz was. So these trebuchets, they routed over here, so they weren't really doing much. I just kept bombarding his front. I'd already taken out one of his trebuchet, which was really, really nice. And again, 50, and he'd lost 160. Not the best trade, to be honest. That's why it's still half. But I just kept cycle charging, because I knew I could break them pretty quickly if I got a couple more good charges in, because he wasn't microing it well enough. And these polearms had also taken a lot of damage. So I moved these up to cover, because I knew once I moved in these infantry, he'd move in the Royal Pegasus Knights, so I needed to counter that with my flying units, so I couldn't really commit them into anything. And again, just keep cycle charging. I've taken 5, inflicted like 50, and these guys were especially doing just horribly. I knew in the next charge I'd break a lot of them, so I quickly regrouped again. So I'm not sure what his sort of plan was here with his frontline units. I was also shooting into these because I wanted to try to break them as quickly as possible so I could charge into the back of his front line. And so then I engaged with my own Pegasus against his Pegasuses, and Karl Franz attacked too. Empire Captain, he took a beating, but the good thing is because I was able to isolate it, so the Empire Captain was fighting with Pegasus Knights, this unit, alone, and Karl Franz is fighting this unit alone. He could micro this and take out their leadership really quickly. As you can see, it's plummeting, and their HP just a lot better. And so because he was able to micro these one at a time, he was able to take them out a lot quicker than he had in that earlier battle. And as you can see, these foot squires have been totally routed. Pretty much destroyed. My cavalry are still at pretty good numbers. They've only lost a couple models each. And again, I just keep cycle charging. They're shaken. Their leadership is horrible. And these charges just devastate their front. I mean, not all of them die, but they do take a lot of damage in these huge charges that happen. And it definitely destroys the morale. Yeah, as you can see. Broke that unit. These ones are wavering, these ones are shaken. And pretty soon I'll be able to take out these men-at-arms. Now, my greatswords weren't doing quite as well as I thought. They, of course, were destroying the polearms, so they weren't killing them as fast as possible. That's when you brought in King Lun. And it's at this point that Karl Franz is able to attack. And I bring in the Empire Captain to just take out this field trebuchet once and for all. So it just couldn't do any more damage to my own. Kind of just as a liability thing, and I'm able to route these two units with Karl Franz. I bring Franz in to attack Lowen, who is attacking my Empire Captain, which is not very fun for him, but fortunately I can just fly off with him, because he's a Pegasus. So we can just run away. And these guys are almost all routed. I bring in one more cycle charge. I kind of want to clean up these forces too, because again, they're kind of liable to come back into battle. I think my opponent did pretty well in this game. Of course, he didn't really do well in most of the games, as you can see. Going for just getting smashed. But I think I took the most losses in this game, just because of that early artillery barrage. And I think he forgot these Pegasus Knights came back. I kind of had the Empire Captain just kind of waiting if he decided to move them in again, because he didn't have that much health left, but I think he could have taken them out. I think I may have had the cannons firing on them, I'm not sure, but these are really, really good with taking out these armored flying units. So I'm just chasing down these men. I'm trying to make them all break. I noticed this group, they're wavering. His front line's kind of buckling too. Lowen's doing pretty well. I have Franz up here for some reason. I think I had him covering the Pegasus, which are moving in again, but again, I still have these spearmen if he tries to go in, and again, I can just snipe the Pegasus Knights. One shot from those will totally destroy them. And all those cannons, each of them is 22 shots each. And yeah, as you can see, just one hit. They'll waver. And one more of them dies and they're out, so there we go. And I think at this point, Lowen ran 2. If you look at the statistics, again, similar pattern. The cannons didn't do as much damage as they did in the other battles. That's why it took 231 losses. I think part of that was just because early on I was kind of just attacking his artillery as opposed to attacking that large blob he had. Again, the cavalry doing just an excellent amount of damage as well. And all in all, his Pegasus Knights were basically able to do nothing just because the captain and Franz were able to take them out very, very quickly. Frontline units didn't really do much that battle, but they're really good. They're meant to just hold And because they can take the most of their frontline units, I know they can't take the great swords very well in the frontline duel. Um, it just works very well in my favor because I have counters to pretty much everything he has in his army. So that's all for now. Hopefully in the future I'll have more of these.